Today marks 9 years ago that I met my husband on our first date, and I'm getting ready to go out on a date with him to commemorate the occasion. We do it every year. I think it's important to enjoy the nostalgia of the little early beginnings back before the children that were so wild today in the house. It was rainy. The kids were wild, but it's still important to take that time as a couple. And I'm really happy that I have a husband who insists that we do, because if it were up to me, I would just live in my house in sweatpants. But he invited me to dinner, as he always does on this anniversary. And I said yes, as I have for the last 9 years. And it's interesting because the day that I met him, I didn't think, I'm going to meet my husband today, but I did have hope. I remember we met the old-fashioned way through the dating apps, and so I had just gotten his last name right before the date, because I was like, oh, what's your last name? I didn't want him to know mine, because he could have Googled me, and there were some things on the Google results that I probably didn't want him to see, like the fact that I'm a recovering alcoholic. That's not something I would lead with on a date. But anyway, so I asked him his last name at the very last minute, assuming that that's what the reservation was under. And he told me Fenimore. And when I walked up to the hostess and I said, oh, I'm here for James Fenimore, she walked me up I'm doing a side part because I did a side part all the way back then. I'm also going to try to fit into the dress that I wore back then and 2 kids ago. Some years it works, some years it doesn't. We'll see what happens. Some years I need a little help from shapewear, but if I have to skip dessert, I never wear it because it's not that important. Enjoying the night and enjoying his company is what's most important. So anyway, as the hostess walked me up the stairs, I remember repeating to myself the last name, Fenimore. Oh, I wonder if one day my last name could be Fenimore. Now you guys know me as Trisha Fenimore. But I just want to share how important hope is, because I've had so many bad first dates. Is this the side I want to part my hair on? It doesn't seem to have a whole lot of volume happening. I wonder if I could pump it up a little. Anyway, I've been on so many bad first dates. When you're dating in New York City, it's a bleak affair, to be honest. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on. But in any event, I dared to hope, walking up those stairs, that maybe, just maybe, this could be the time that it worked. And the only thing that I can really compare it to is when I got sober after having tried to quit for so long, and then finally, giving up, reaching up, and, daring to hope that maybe this time, if I pray to a God that I didn't really believe in, maybe that could work. And sure enough, that was the time that it did, and that was 14 years ago. But I think hope is so important, and daring to get one's hopes up, even when things hadn't worked out in the past. Even when you've been on a million bad dates, your ex was crazy, you were crazy, let's be honest, like attracts like most of the time. I was crazy, I'll be the first to admit it. My exes will be the next. But it's to dare to get your hopes up is one of the bravest things that we can do in life. And I think back so fondly as I walked up those stairs at that restaurant thinking, oh, Fenimore. I wonder if that'll be my last name one day. And now here we are, all these years and a couple children later, and it's just incredible what hope can do. Because I had given up hoping for a relationship for so long, to the extent that I would just cancel my dates. And I wouldn't go out with them, and I'd say, oh, I don't really feel like it, or oh, today was so crazy at work, let's reschedule. And then I'd never reach out to reschedule. But on this occasion, I dared to hope. And what I found on the other side of hope was such a reward. And I think that there's such a reward on the other end of hoping, because the enemy knows how hard it is to do, how hard it is to look at failed pregnancy test after failed pregnancy test, after relapse, after bad first date after bad first date, after, name it, terrible job after terrible job. When we look at our past and look only at the negative and think that that's going to form some pattern in the future, then it denies us the hope that is actually the window through which our blessings can come. And today I just want to share that it's so important for couples to take this time and be nostalgic about the early days and reflect on how far you've come, and really just take the time, no matter how tired you may be, to celebrate each other and the relationship, but how important it also is to always hope that God might have a little something different in store for you. Because if I hadn't done that, if I had, given up and given in, then we would have never met. I would never be in this life. And I can honestly tell you that, that probably isn't good, that His love will go down in my life as the most healing love that I've ever experienced. It healed parts of me that I didn't even know were broken. I didn't even know, how I used to let myself be spoken to, be spoken about. I had no idea what real love was, how it defends people behind their backs, and that it's honorable and that it's respectful, and that it's compassionate. I remember I was once out with an ex, and I was in sobriety. I was in early sobriety, and I asked, out of curiosity, like women sometimes do, what would you do if, and I go, what would you do if I was like a vegetarian or something? And he scoffed and goes, ugh, you being a recovering alcoholic is bad enough. And I just kept eating my lunch because that's how I thought I should be talked to. And the second date with my husband was really the one where I fell in love with him, because that was the date I told him that I was in recovery for alcoholism. Now, I would normally not tell somebody that so early. That's kind of putting people on the spot. And I wanted to try to let him get to know me before introducing this, not so feminine, not so dainty fact about myself, is that I'm a recovering alcoholic. But as circumstances played out, I decided to, trust God, and when it came up organically is when I would share it with him. But then I regretted that immediately when the circumstances on our second date necessitated me telling him. For our second date, he took me to Il Mulino, which is a super duper fancy Italian restaurant in Manhattan. I opened the menu and looked at the appetizer prices, and I was like, oh gosh, I'm from a little farm town in the Midwest. I was not in Kansas anymore. And so I ordered, so I don't eat anything with alcohol in it. It's just, if you knew me then, you'd know it's just not worth the risk. So I try to avoid alcohol in all of its forms. And so looking down the menu, it was like chicken piccata with white wine, beef bourguignon, or not beef bourguignon, bolognese with the red wine. And then there's penne alla vodka, which was always a favorite of mine, but it's I can't eat any of that. So what was I going to order? So I ordered the very, very sexy dish of fettuccine Alfredo on our second date. And it arrived, and I was terrified of this man finding out that I was a recovering alcoholic. They dropped the fettuccine Alfredo, and I take one bite of it, and he's telling me a story, and I taste the white wine in it. I taste it. And I realized in that moment that I had a few choices. I could A, send it back with no explanation to him and look like some, prima donna diva who's like, I can't eat this, send it back, take it away. Or I could eat it and then spin out in my head with anxiety the rest of the night. Or I could tell him, which was the scariest option, to be eating it and then, potentially relapsing is obviously the scariest option, but this one was number 2 on the list. But I realized in that moment that that's what I needed to do, was I needed to be honest with him about why I was not going to be able to eat this quite expensive bowl of fettuccine Alfredo on our second date. And so I got quiet, and I said a little prayer, and I said, God, please just guide my words. Just be with me as I tell him this. And I looked at him and I said, I have to tell you something. I'm not going to be able to eat this. I'm coming up on 5 years sober. This was back in 2018 on our second date. I'm coming up on 5 years sober, and I don't eat anything with alcohol in it, and this has alcohol in it. And up to then, I really thought that no man would want to be with me. because it would be inconvenient, it would be annoying, like what my ex-boyfriend was referring to, because he still drank. I thought it was like this big hassle that no one would want to deal with. And I avoided opening myself up to people for so long because I was scared. Oh, I'm gonna mess up my eye makeup. Don't mess up your eye makeup, honey. This man looked at me, and in the span of about 20 seconds, he flagged down the server, looked at me, looked at the server, said, "We're gonna need to see a menu. Order whatever you want. Box this up to go. I'm gonna take this home. Order whatever you want." And in the span of 20 seconds, had every concern of mine addressed, because I was worried about the money because I used to live in poverty. And so I wasn't sure what was gonna happen to the food because it was so expensive. And he told me he would take it home. And I was worried about, I don't know, I was worried about everything. And he took every worry, and he took care of me. And the thing I was so scared to tell him wound up being the moment that I fell in love with my husband. And here we are 9 years later, 2 kids later, and I'm gonna go see if I can still fit into the dress. Let's see, wish me luck. It fits. It fits, and I'm so excited. This is the dress I wore on our first date. I'll share the photo that I took before the date. But, it doesn't matter about a dress. It doesn't matter about a ring. It doesn't matter about any of this. You go get you a man who makes you feel safe, who makes all your vulnerabilities not into a big inconvenience or not into a big issue, but who makes it his job to love you and to protect you and to keep you safe. And that is a man in a relationship worth celebrating. So I'm gonna go do just that with my husband. Just got home from our date, and I gotta tell you, I'm pretty confident I'm gonna see him again. Mostly because we share a house and 2 children, but also because he is just as charming and irresistible today as he was back then. Honestly, even more.